How's it going, everybody? I'm Dwyer. Most of you probably know me from Hatchlings, which is the world's largest Easter egg hunt. And that's the company that I've been working on for about the last 5 years. And recently, about a year and a half ago, we started hiring people and expanding out our team here in Des Moines. And one of the goals of that has been to launch our second and then hopefully some more subsequent games. So our second game that we're working on launching is called AlphaBrawl. It kind of came about because we wanted to do a team building activity, and so we brought a bunch of our team members to Startup Weekend Des Moines last fall. We were kind of trying to figure out what it was that we were going to do as our Startup Weekend project. And this was a game that I kind of played as a kid. We invented it independently of some others, it sounds like. It's a really simple word game, and we decided that that was what we wanted to work on for Startup Weekend. So we spent about 72 hours building the first version of that, and that was back last fall. And we've been kind of working on it ever since. Not really 100%. That's one of our things that we're kind of struggling with right now, is how much time we balance between Hatchlings, which is our already established game, and our new game that we were hoping would come out June 1st, and now we're hoping it'll come out July 1st. So kind of, I guess the best way to explain the game to you guys is to have you play through it. And so I'll kind of explain the rules to you. It's a turn-based word game, but the twist is, unlike all other word games, you're not trying to form a word. You're trying to get your opponent to form a word before you do. So it's kind of a bit like chess. You're trying to lure them into a word, and they're trying to lure you into a word. And the only other rule besides that is that a word always has to be possible. So you start out, we had some game cards, but I think with some flooding issues, they're not here yet. So I'll give you guys the demo. Does anybody want to play with me on the screen? Any volunteers? Cool. Come on up. So I'll start off the game by playing a letter, and I'll play the letter E. So now it's your turn to add a letter either to the left or to the right of that, and your goal is to trick me into forming a word before I trick you into forming one. With the key is that there always has to be one possible. I got it over here. So he played an N, so now the letters are N-E, and now I have to kind of coerce him into forming a word. So I'll play an X. Now it's your turn.
It's a tough one. That's an impossible word. No.
So he played an I.
I didn't even know that was a word.
I'm kind of stumped. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to challenge him now. And so, like I said, a word always has to be possible. And so if I can't think of a word, now I've challenged him, and he has to complete that word to finish the round. So if he can produce the word that he was trying to lead me into, he wins. Otherwise, if there was no word that he was going for, then I win that round.
I'm going to be honest, I didn't really have a word in mind, but I guess that's one that may be my word.
So he played anexia, which is not in the dictionary, which means that I win since he wasn't able to come up with a word.
Does it challenge? You only get
No, you can play as many letters as you want on the challenge, which is a good point. So I guess kind of the first thing that we're struggling with is explaining the rules as succinctly and as clearly as possible. We've kind of found that when you explain the rules like I did at first, you get a lot of puzzled looks, but then once you kind of walk somebody through a game, they start to understand some things. So throughout the rest of the talk, that's something that I hope you guys can kind of think about and help me out with afterwards, is how we can more clearly explain the rules so that you get that aha moment before you even start to play, rather than after you lose for the first time. So I talked a little bit about some of the things that we're struggling with, and the rules is one of those, just like the copy for that and how you explain the game to a new person. But we're also kind of struggling with what our MVP is. This is a version that we built for our Hatchlings 5th birthday party in February, and it took like 2 days to just get the basic code built to get something out there that people could try. But obviously this isn't finished enough to launch into the App Store. We definitely need things like user accounts where this game, it's only 2 people total who can be playing because there's no concept of who it is. It's just, one person signs on, they choose player 1, another person signs on, they're player 2. So we've been working on Facebook login, and we've been working on some other things. And so some of the things that we've been thinking about are what is the least amount that we can do to launch in the App Store and still be successful. So I just kind of want to do a quick poll here. After watching that game, how many of you guys are smartphone users, for one? How many of you guys would be interested in playing a game like this? How many of you guys play like Words with Friends or something like that? So a fair portion. This is going to tie in later, but how many of those people would play this if it was Facebook login only? Not as many. How many would play if you could log in with Twitter? A couple others. And how many would play if it was like anonymous, where you could just sign on and without signing on with anything, you could be paired with another player? So a couple more. So those are some of the things that we're wrestling with the team is how broadly do we need to define our market to be successful, and what are the features that we need to actually implement to get there. And I mean, we have a lot of things that we want to do. We want to do like a multiplayer game. So instead of just 2 players, this game's just as fun if you have 3 people and you're going around in a circle and knock somebody out. And there's a whole, it's such a simple concept that it makes it really challenging to decide what the layers of complexity that we add on top of it are. And also with our release date coming up, that's another consideration that we have to have. We could build in all these features and not launch for 3 years, but I don't think that would be a good idea. There's definitely a balance between the absolute minimum we could do, which is this, and what is going to be successful in the App Store. One of the other things that we're working on, we've been pretty successful on Facebook with Hatchlings, but this is a whole nother ball game launching in the App Store. And so we've been doing a lot of research about how people launch apps into the App Store and how they get their first 1,000 or 10,000 or million users. And it's a lot different from Facebook. And so we've been doing a lot of research, but until we actually get out there and put something out there and see how it reacts, it's kind of hard to figure out where our marketing efforts should be targeted. Going back to that question of how many of you people have smartphones and play Words with Friends, it's a huge market, and it's really broad and varied. My 19-year-old cousin plays Words with Friends with my 55-year-old uncle, and those are completely different segments in the market. So we were kind of struggling with who is our app targeted at, because it's so wide that it makes it challenging to figure out who our customer really is and who we should be targeting. And so some of the things that we're thinking about for marketing is obviously it's going to be a multiplayer game. So when you come in, if you play a game, hopefully you'll be inviting one of your Facebook friends to play with you, which should inherently kind of have things spread out. But that's also a challenge because, as we saw a couple of seconds ago, not everybody wants to play with their Facebook friends. And we also are probably going to seed it with some Facebook ads, but again, with Facebook ads, you need to target your audience, and we don't really know exactly who it is that we want to target first. We'll probably do like a broad cross-section and see kind of who starts playing first, and then focus our efforts on that. But I'd be interested in hearing any other strategies that people would have. And then obviously, since we have another successful game, we're going to be cross-promoting into that channel. So we have tens of thousands of people who play Hatchlings, and hopefully we'll be able to get some of those people to come in and play AlphaBrawl and seed it with an initial user base. Because obviously a multiplayer game isn't very fun unless you have multiple players playing it. And then, as I kind of alluded to earlier, another challenge that we're facing is our time allocation between Hatchlings and this. We have thousands of paying customers on Hatchlings, and so we can't really be like, hey guys, we're taking a couple months off, and we're just going to let you kind of flounder and not do anything on that side, and then devote our full time to AlphaBrawl. But we also want to devote enough time that we can get this out there in a timely manner. And some of the things that we've been trying are doing one-day sprints or one-week sprints, where the entire team is focused on the same game for the same period of time. And something else we've tried is splitting the team so that half the team is working on one thing and half the team is working on the other game. And neither of those has really worked very well. In terms of devoting an entire day. We tried, I think, Tuesdays, devoting the entire day Tuesday on AlphaBrawl. And it just takes so much time to switch gears and get your mind working on something new, and get the team back up to speed on what we were working on last week, that by the time we get up to speed, 3/4 of the day is gone and we really don't get all that much actual productive work done. And splitting the team doesn't work very well because oftentimes you'll need to consult with somebody, but if they're working on a completely different game, it's challenging to ask them a question, pull them out of that mindset and into that other context for 5 or 10 or 20 minutes, and then expect them to be able to jump right back into what they were doing. So I don't know if anybody's been in a company where you've been working on kind of 2 different roles, but I've never actually had a real job. I dropped out of school to do Hatchlings, so I'd be definitely really interested in hearing how other people have tackled that problem of working on a new product while keeping an old product going and continuing to iterate on and add new features to that. So those are kind of my talking points, I guess. So I guess I'll open it up to questions. I don't know if that was my 6 minutes, but Darian?
Yeah, a couple things. One, in terms of how you explain it. What you said was it's like chess, and the thing for me is I don't know chess. I know checkers, but I don't know chess, and I get that it's a game and there's an opponent, but when I saw you actually playing it out, the word or the game that came to my mind of reference was tic-tac-toe. So I don't know, tic-tac-toe means Scrabble,
Cool.
or tic-tac-toe means...
Let me grab a pen real quick. Thanks.
Maybe connect more, but the other thought that I had was maybe to get people to engage is, I don't know if you have a way of doing this, but if you can play against the game, so if I'm a single user and I can play it out, sort of get a feel for it, maybe I win every time on that level, but it just gives me a sense of what it's about.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we were talking about doing. So before you even authorize your Facebook account or whatever, we think you probably want to know how to play before you invite your friends to this game that it's kind of a crapshoot whether it's going to be good or bad. So we're thinking of having a tutorial version, and this is another question. So in the tutorial version, it would be trivial to make a computer that always beats you or always loses. And I don't know which of those two is better. Do you think as a learning experience, always losing to the computer so that you understand what the rules are, you play something and it's like that negative reinforcement of, oh shoot, I shouldn't have played that because I completed a word. Oh shoot, I opened the door to them putting an ing on this word and getting me back. Is that more valuable, or is it more valuable to see the computer fail and kind of get...
You had stages, like easy, medium, and difficult, and I can sort of play it out from there.
Interesting.
I think you have the biggest example in Las Vegas. It's random. It needs to be, the strongest reinforcement is random reinforcement.
Cool.
That's proven.
Getting AlphaBrawl on a tutorial side, easy is probably the best way to go. Get them into the game and using it. Because you're teaching them a new game. This isn't Words with Friends, which is Scrabble. Everybody knows Scrabble.
Right.
This is a completely new game. So I think you have to start in a tutorial sense. Let them.
So along those lines, has anybody ever played this game before, or a similar game to this? Because that's one of the things, one person? Oh, well, all right. So kind of when we originally conceived of this, it was a game that I used to play on road trips with my cousins. But we've recently found out that it's kind of a wider spread game than that. Either it's been invented, concurrently, or one of my cousins had heard about it somewhere and introduced it to me. But I guess the game is actually called Ghost, or there was another name for it, but there's a Wikipedia article on it. But from what we can tell, using that as like an example isn't going to be very helpful because 95% of the people here haven't heard of it. But that was another thing, is that if we could use like a game that people have already played before to introduce it. Yeah, leave it.
With that being said, games are trademark, copyrighted, and whatnot. What have you been looking at in that sense?
So it seems to be just kind of like a tic-tac-toe style, not owned by a corporation, but just something that people have played for 100 years, just because you can play it out loud. You say one letter and then the next person says the other letter. And in the original game, you can only add to the end, just to make it simpler of, like if you're doing it out loud, you want to keep track of what the word is, and it's harder to keep track in your mind of adding to the beginning. So yeah, we haven't found anything of people actually using it in a commercial sense at all. John?
In your tutorial, you should run through a couple of levels, and the first one you should absolutely win, and maybe the second or third one you should absolutely lose, so that you understand both sides of. And let them know beforehand you're going to lose this one. We want to show you what it looks like to lose.
Right. It's challenging to do that because, like, if you play an X, or like they play an X and you play something and they play a word that's not possible to form a word, I guess the computer could keep doing stuff, but that might get confused. Yeah, that's something that we've kind of struggled with, is how do you...
You may, in the tutorial, you may have a restricted set of
that's a good point,
options.
of letters. Yeah.
Saw this TED Talk, it's a little bit old, it was like from 2005, but there was this lady on the TED Talk, I forget her name. She said that games are becoming kind of like a way to educate. Have you thought about about this game is going to educate people? I mean, it's becoming kind of part of the way, like you said, your 55-year-old uncle and your 22-year-old cousin are playing each other. It's something. Have you thought if there's any? I mean, obviously Hatchlings has some element of that, but what the
actually, Mike just came up with. Mike's one of our developers, and he came up with an awesome feature the other day. One of the things that I hate about Words with Friends is that people will play these like obscure words that are apparently in the dictionary, but you never, even though you learn that that's a word that you can play QI, you never learn what that is. And so Mike built in a dictionary feature. I think one of the cool things will be expanding your vocabulary. So, if somebody plays, or if you accidentally play a word and you lose, that you can actually look up the definition of that word and say, oh, I lost because that's, a small rodent in Africa or something like that.
That's what I'm saying, because of education.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, you might want to think of contacting Khan Academy, which is a Harvard-based educational system, and hook them up and say, hey, try and get them to make a list of games which include yours because it's educational for vocabulary. Like what we used to play, what is the game with the words in kids,
Scrabble?
Scrabble, exactly. Okay. Scrabble, the old-fashioned, this is like a new version of Scrabble. And you might want to give them a call or be in touch with them because this would be great for people to learn expanded vocabulary.
Cool. Yeah.
With the demo, maybe you could show not you playing it, but two players, and and that might be easier to follow along. This person does this.
Would you imagine that being a video or just
It's like a little tour. I mean, just to walk through.
How have you seen that work well for other sites? Is there anything that I could look at as a good example of somebody who does, a video intro before immersing somebody in?
I don't think.
Because I'd be interested. That's one of the things that we've kind of thought about as well.
Another question: are you going to look at different languages? Or?
That's another challenge. Right now, I think we're going to restrict it to English, and our dictionary is U.S.-based English. But I think eventually it would make sense. There's some problems. So like in Spanish, any verb has like 5 different endings, and so I'm not sure how fun it would be if you get to the end of the verb and then you just have to decide what conjugation you're going to do, and whoever picks the conjugation basically picks who wins. But yeah, definitely something we've been thinking about, mostly in terms of limiting it to English first, especially with the character set.
And how do you monetize these?
So that's another part of our MVP. We're trying to decide. We're going to have a currency system eventually, but we're trying to decide whether it's more important to get people immersed into the game and playing as many games as possible and hooked up front, or if we want to introduce like a token system where you get a certain number of tokens every once in a while, and once you use those to start a game, once you run out, you would have to pay for more. We also have boosts, so like if you wanted to like erase the last letter or like explode a letter in the middle or maybe play 2 turns. We have a ton of ideas for boosts. We're not sure how they'd affect gameplay. That's one of the things we're thinking of, is that you'd get a certain amount and you'd be able to buy more of them. That's part of our struggles, is when do we start optimizing for monetization rather than growth, or is it even a trade-off, and can we do both at the same time? Yeah.
Do other free games end up selling ads, or how do they?
A lot of them do sell ads. after Hatchlings, I'm kind of soured on the ad experience, and I really like the model. I don't know if anybody's played Dots, but they don't have any ads, and I think that makes the experience a lot better. But ads are definitely something that we could look into, especially as a short-term monetization play before we introduce currency.
Like Words with Friends, after the free version, after each turn, you see an ad. Where I think the paid version, that probably doesn't work.
Right, and that's one of the only reasons that to upgrade in that. So they'll give you the game for free with ads, and I don't know how much money they make off the ads, but they make a lot more off of people paying to get rid of the ads. So it's really just like an annoyance barrier of, pay us to get rid of this annoying thing. Yeah.
Who are you testing this with?
So we're just testing it internally with our team so far. With the App Store, you only get 100 different devices that you can use ever. So our strategy so far has been to hold it pretty close to the vest, and then when we're ready to get ready to launch, introduce it to some journalists and some people who can hopefully amplify the noise around the launch. That's also been a challenge though, because our strategy with Hatchlings has always been release it as early as we can to as many people as we can and iterate based on what they say, which as far as we can tell, that's really hard to do in the App Store. An interesting way that people have gotten around it is with Mailbox. They had a waiting list, and so you could actually download the app from the App Store but not be allowed in yet while they were scaling up their services and all that.
Well, there's a couple ladies that I work with, and they play Scrabble every day at lunch. And it kind of looks like Scrabble to me, sort of.
Yeah.
But I know that one of the ladies is in a Scrabble group that's in Des Moines, and I mean, they have tournaments.
Cool.
And maybe...
That's a great idea. I hadn't even thought about getting into the real world board game community to seed it with passionate users at the beginning. That's a good
But you
point.
can also set up like a tournament play with brackets and whatnot.
That'd be cool.
So you could pay for that.
Yeah, Jeff.
Especially on the game mechanics. So it lets you, I can put letters that won't possibly make order, right?
Right.
Okay. Is there any reason not to just only allow for like logical words?
Yeah, because we want you to be able to bluff and be able to hopefully get them to be like, if you know you're gonna lose, right, and there's only one letter possible, or you think there might be another letter possible, sometimes you'll put that in there and they'll play along with it and think it's a word, or you could even know it's not a word and you could kind of trick them into adding on to a bad word so that then you can challenge them to knock them out of that layer of kind of strategy to it, I guess, over the top of just only being able to drag what you could. But I actually hadn't. Might be something to explore and try out, even in the tutorial mode of just blocking stuff out.
And so the game ends with either I accidentally create a word or I lose a challenge, or I challenge basically. Right? Those are the two. And
Or your opponent accidentally or purposely creates a word, yeah.
okay.
But one thing I didn't mention, in the actual iOS game, it's going to be best of 5. So the loser of the previous word ends up starting the next word to lead people towards the next one. Yeah.
So when you port this over to a mobile app or a smartphone, would you have it be similar to kind of like Words with Friends, where it's like a turn-based thing, like, oh, I play a word and then I'm waiting and then, I get a notification from my friend that they play.
I can actually show you what we have so far on the iOS side if you want. That's one of the things we've been really working on, is getting this onto a mobile device. We built it so that it should be able to come out concurrently with Android and iOS. One of the things that we've been working hard on is the keyboard layout. So I'll get this booted up really quick, but yeah, I'll come back to that and I can show you that. Aaron?
So you mentioned that you played this on a road trip, and I see this like a perfect, road trip. Actually, two people sitting next to each other playing. Are you going to allow that on
Yeah. Not on one device to start with. That's part of the MVP. We've talked about that, and I think that would be really cool. But it does, if you're sitting right next to somebody, it does update in real time. You can just leave the game screen open, and it uses WebSockets to communicate. So the letter just appears. You don't have to refresh or pull to refresh or whatever. So it does enable you to play back and forth really quickly, or you can just, you can wait an hour before turns and really strategize and think about your next move if you want to.
Yeah.
I think you might want to reconsider whether that's part of your MVP or not, because if I've been hooked on AlphaBrawl,
Yep.
and I want to share it with Ben, it's much easier for me to share it if I can just pass my phone back and forth and we can just play it on my phone, versus telling him he has to download the app and do all of the stuff to get it started. And so you allow more variability by allowing it to be passed down.
That's a good point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you talked early on about like how you would, and it goes to the point too of like getting people adoption and stuff. But why would you force them to log in, or is there an option to like anonymously play, or would you always have them? Okay, you have to log into Twitter.
That's one of the things we're talking about internally. I think we want to do an anonymous play. It just adds another level of complexity. I'm not exactly sure technically how we would do it, and it also decreases that virality factor of. Ideally, we want people to play with their friends. Games are a lot more fun when you play with people you actually know instead of random people who may be cheating or whatever. But I think we do want to launch that. It's just a matter of whether we want to spend a couple weeks figuring out exactly how that should work, and whether you should have a username or whether you should create a password with your email account. How it would work. If you come back and want to log out or want to add your Facebook account, how those games merge. It's more of a technical issue than anything. And I don't know, we're using Singly for the Facebook and Twitter integration, so that makes anything with a user account easy to log in with. But I don't know that they have like an anonymous tokenized system, so that would be something we'd have to build on top.
Yeah.
I remember when Words with Friends first released, I think it was like unique accounts that you had to set up and you could invite others based on their email, but there was no social media connectivity. And when they launched that, I feel like they just blew up because it made, I already like this game, now all these new people I can.
Do you remember how did you start a game with like somebody that you knew?
I think it was their email address. I would have to think about that a little more. I don't remember off the top, but I know that when they opened it up to Facebook, I was like, hell yeah. And it opened up a whole new set of players I could play with.
Cool.
The other thing that you might want to consider on iOS is Game Center.
Nice. Do you have any examples of other games that use Game Center well?
Letterpress, just a second, you know about Game Center, I'll tell you that.
Hey Brad,
Yeah.
I would like seeing iOS using the TV, have two people using their smartphones, and then that's our scoreboard, and then we're watching the game in the same room. I don't know if that's already built in, but I'd love to play that on the TV.
So
That
could be cool.
Cool. That ties it. We not really related, but my most recent startup weekend project was called Phone Troller, and it's actually it uses your smartphone as a controller for like a computer or web-based game, and you can play multiplayer stuff like that.
I think a good example too would be to look at Smart Glass with Xbox.
Yeah, or Wii U. It was what we kind of based that off of too.
What's that?
The Wii U. I know, right?
Brad,
Yep.
Letterpress, Angry Birds, Polymer, Tiny Tower, Tap Revenge. There's lots and lots of apps that use Game Center. It's built into the iOS frameworks.
Cool.
And it has recommendations and automatic connecting with friends and whatnot.
Nice.
So,
Yep.
If you log in with Facebook, maybe, and this adds complexity, but maybe you have an icon or something you could click for anonymity. So you log in with Facebook and you can open it up to all of that. But if I click this, I can create sort of a fake screen name that I go incognito.
Yep, definitely. And if we added anonymous accounts, that would definitely be a part of it, as a random matchmaking part of it as well. Jeff?
The name really suggests competition with it, like really competitive. Like, are there other elements besides the gameplay that like you're thinking about? Because I like the game, but then it really sounds like something like you're fighting. So like, how does that come into it?
Okay, so this is something I didn't quite touch on. That's good that you brought that up. One of the things that we're wrestling with right now is our brand identity, and kind of the reason that we picked that name. And they updated this, and I have to figure out how to actually work it now. So I was going to show you what the game looks like, but it's boxing themed. And so we kind of started that out and picked the name based on the boxing theme. And so when you beat somebody, you knock them out. When we introduced like leveling up systems of like, you'll have a record like 51 wins and 0 losses, and you level up from like featherweight to lightweight to heavyweight. That's one of the things we're wrestling with right now, though, is that's another added element, and we're not sure if we want. We really like the idea, and it gives us like a lot of direction of, we're introducing a challenge that should be based on a referee or a bell dinging in boxing, and it's easy to bring in elements and make it a cohesive theme. But by the same token, it's really a simple game, and we're wondering if we're adding complexity on top of that. So that's one of the things we're struggling with. But the AlphaBrawl name really comes from that boxing theme, and that you're jabbing back and forth like 1-2 punch, and you're trying to outlast your opponent basically. I'm not sure. Anybody have opinions on that? Does that make any sense for a word game? Does that sound more enticing than just a generic word game, like a Words with Friends or a Dots or something?
I like it. I was actually just talking to Ben a minute ago. The tie into Scrabble keeps coming up, and then I thought Scrapple, should exchange the B's for P's, and it almost sort of insinuates that it's closely related, but it's not the same. I don't know. I'm throwing that out there.
Words with Friends got sued by Hasbro because I forget what their original name was. Or it was Lexulus or something was the one that got sued. I forget what it was called though. It was called Scrabulus originally. They protect their trademarks pretty closely. Yeah.
Well, now Zynga sued other people to add friends with the same name too, so they've taken that.
Yep.
You talk about like really simple, like would that be like the Dots influence? Like Dots is super simple interface and it's really easy to
Right, and that's something we really like. It doesn't add a lot of distraction from the actual gameplay that you're doing. We're kind of going for that simple design. It'll take me a couple minutes to set up the key to run this on the simulator. I wish I could show. We have the game cards here if anybody wants to try and play, I guess. But yeah, that would be kind of the antithesis. It's Dots versus. We were trying to come up yesterday with the antithesis to Dots, but the themed game, and the best we could come up with was Word Derby, which is a word game that's themed around horse racing. And I don't know if anybody's seen it, but kind of as you're going towards the finish line, you're supposed to get a certain number of points, and your horse is like racing ahead of the other horse. So those are kind of the two opposite ends of the spectrum, and we're trying to figure out. I think we don't want to be somewhere in the middle. If we're going to go for the themed one, we want to go all the way over there. And if we don't, then we want to completely cut the boxing theme completely and go the Dots letterpress simple route. And that's kind of a challenge with the identity too, that we thought we knew what we wanted, and then now I think we're kind of second guessing ourselves. Yep.
So one of the other items that you specifically, like questions that you had for the audience was on multitasking or assigning time for this project. And especially for a developer position, multitasking is horrible.
Right.
I mean, like you said, the context switching, you lose all kinds of productivity and everything. So my question would be, are you 100% development under your other products that you can't spin off anybody to work on, even a single developer?
We only have two.
Oh, okay.
We have me and Mike. And so, yeah, I mean, it makes it challenging.
Yeah.
Kind of what we've been doing recently is Mike's been devoting all of his time at Hatchlings to AlphaBrawl, and I've been jumping back and forth still. And it's tough because I also play the CEO role in addition to a developer role.
Yeah.
So that's, adding a developer of app A and developer of app B and CEO role is even more of a challenge to decide what my time should be spent on.
But I think, you were going down the right path. It's kind of multitasking, just don't do it. You lose more time than it's worth.
Right, and one of that's kind of how we got to this point of, now it's been 6 months, is that Hatchlings needed our full attention during Easter season, and that worked out pretty well, but also at the expense of, we're not ready to launch AlphaBrawl. Yeah.
One thing we do on those lines with the different products is you have certain things you're going to release that for this one product, we're gonna add all these enhancements. So you work on those, and then you're done, and then you go to the other, the other one. So at least you're not losing the concentration you had on that, what you were working on. And so that might be one way. But I don't know if you're even, you don't even have a first release of the first one, right? But you could do, what features you want to add to the beta kind of thing.
Right.
This would be one way to do it.
Well,
Instead
one
of
of,
just
our,
taking
one
day.
of our other challenges is that Hatchlings is a game where there's new content coming out every day, so somebody has to be, like every week we have our artists that are working on stuff that, needs to, like that's one of the draws of Hatchlings is that it's always fresh and there's always new stuff coming out, and we have events and those sorts of things, which it's harder to, I guess we could pre-plan those. I mean, that's a good point. We're just, I guess, not at a strategic point where we even know what we want to do 6 months from now, much less being able to plan it and do it ahead of that point. But that would definitely be...
Yeah, but instead of just dedicating a day to do this, hey, we're going to finish this thing, and then go to back to the other one.
Cool.
With the workload and the team members, I'm curious how you built the team for Hatchlings and how that might lead into maybe adding someone that's dedicated to AlphaBrawl.
We kind of built the team thinking about future games also. And so the first person we hired was Lindsay, who is a designer, and that really complemented my development skills of, she could be working on what we're going to release next week and I could be programming on what we planned the week before. And then we've added customer service and community management kind of as we went. And we added George for marketing, which has been helpful. He's been, I think the marketing role, George can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a little bit easier to split your time between, focusing on how we're going to grow Hatchlings and how we're going to grow AlphaBrawl, because they're pretty similar. It's kind of a, things you learn from one will apply to the other. And then Mike, as a developer, we hired him because we needed a little bit of help still with Hatchlings, but also he has iOS experience, and so it was really kind of a forward-looking, we're going to launch this game. And Karen also, she does like the graphical visual design aspect of things as opposed to the UX design that Lindsay does, and so that it kind of applies to both. We've been hiring people that hopefully can help us with both and that we can shift back and forth. I don't know if that answered the question.
Oh, it was interesting. Do you have anyone that works remotely or is it all local?
My mom does, but she does like day-to-day, like she pays the bills and makes sure that payroll goes out and that sort of thing. And then we have like 4 illustrators that are spread across the country that exclusively do Hatchling stuff. Yeah.
You might have mentioned this. Are you going to release this under the Hatchling brand?
Another thing we're struggling with, the plan right now is yes. We've talked as a team about what Hatchlings is. Is Hatchlings the game or is Hatchlings the company? And right now it's both because we only have one product. And one of the things that we struggle with is that has a lot of name recognition at this point of the Hatchlings name and brand. But I don't have a good answer for it right now.
No, at least it's in your brain, because that is the brand, so think about.
I know you know the items demographic really well, and you talked about the differences like in your code and your own thing. Do the demographics for something like Words with Friends, are they similar to the Hatchlings demographic? Or is it,
I think they're wider.
It's probably more like...
I don't have any hard data on this, but my anecdotal answer is that it's wider. Hatchlings is very women heavy and very skewed towards the older side of things. We hardly have any people in their 20s or 30s playing, more in the upper end of their 30s. But I think ideally with the word game, it's going to hit that broad, anything from 12 to dead.
Yeah. One thing you might want to consider if your release is going on Gmail and doing invite only. Give it to your Hatchlings clientele and give them like 5 invites or something like that. And so if it starts playing like Words with Friends, where the 18-year-old is playing with the 50-year-old, well, you have the 50-year-olds that already have it, and they're inviting their grandchildren and children or whatever, and do it kind of that way.
By email?
Yeah, or however, but just have a limited, have it so that they can invite people to play, because it's not like Mailbox where you download the app and then you have to wait. Because if I have to wait, that means that the people that already have the app to play me
Right.
have to wait too.
Right.
And so you want to probably go the Gmail route where you have invites that you can actually add people.
So what would be the advantage of restricting it that way rather than just letting you invite as many of your friends as you want to?
Because two reasons. One, it helps with the back end in terms of scaling your back end. You're not going to get inundated with huge amounts. And the other thing is that it also creates it creates a
False sense.
yes, an exclusivity. Thank you. Sorry. So that now it becomes you have that exclusivity that I can't get in because my grandma doesn't have it because she's not on the Hatchlings list.
So can you talk me through how that would work? Like, let's say you download the app. Who gets the invites originally, and how do they?
The Hatchlings people, your existing clientele. You basically send them a whisper or however you do it and say, hey, check out our new game. You guys are the first ones. They feel good because you're letting them in early on something, and then they get 5 invites that they can invite their friends and go that way.
I do like the idea of using that awesome user base that you already have, but how similar are the users that are playing one versus the other?
I think the biggest challenge we'll have in cross promotion is the smartphone issue. We're basically all women over 35, and we've been getting a lot more requests for a Hatchlings iPhone app, but I think relative to the population as a whole, I think the penetration of smartphones in our Hatchlings demographic is probably lower than your average person, just because of probably the age and demographic difference. But I don't have any hard numbers to support that. It could just be, and it might have been a self-selection thing too, because there's no Hatchlings iPhone game, so the people who browse, only on their iPhone aren't ever going to find Hatchlings.
Have you considered building this into the Facebook environment?
Yeah, and it should be pretty easy to port. We built it on HTML5, so that would be relatively easy to do. And one of the things we want to do is have the cross-platform people all be able to play against each other. So if I want to start a game with Jeff, I don't need to know if he has an iPhone or an Android device. I can just say, hey, he's on my friends list. It has him listed as somebody who's in the app, and I can start a game. So Facebook would probably work the same way. Yep.
And even if you didn't go the exclusivity route, you could still leverage your existing client base by, I don't know what kind of promotions or things you could give, but you could give them 5 invites and be like, hey, if you give out these invites and these people sign up and play a game, you get an Easter egg or something.
Right, yeah, that's definitely, the incentivized route is something that would be a lot easier to do since it's all one company, and the incentives really definitely align to get our existing players into the new game.
Right.
Darren.
Shifting gears, but another feature, and maybe you've already thought of this, would be the time. You mentioned you could take half a day to choose your next letter, but maybe a competitive aspect in that brawl would be you get 60 seconds or 30 seconds, maybe you choose your intervals. It might add another level.
Yeah, that would be cool. I'm a little worried about the technical aspect of like what happens if your network connection drops, but yeah, that would be cool. There's definitely lots of game modes that we've thought about, and that's another challenge, has been picking what is the canonical rule set for this game. Like what is AlphaBrawl, and then what is like AlphaBrawl speed version, or what is AlphaBrawl multiplayer.
Out of curiosity, I just apologize to cut you off. Out of curiosity, so you were going to launch June 1st, now you push it back to July. It sounds like you're really ready to just launch this almost as it is. So what do you need to shore up in the next month? Because obviously there's lots of ideas for where this could go, but what does that MVP look like for you?
We need to get all the bugs fixed, obviously. Lindsay's done an awesome UI design, and we haven't completely translated that from our testing version that we had ready at the end of December to our actual vision for this is a polished app that is ready to launch, and that people aren't going to come in and go like, so there's a lot of polish that needs to be done, a lot of bugs that need to be fixed, and still a lot of features that need to be added. And like I said, we still haven't pinned down exactly what it is that's our MVP, and so it's challenging to say we're going to launch July 1st when we don't know what features it is that we need to launch July 1st. I think once we get to a certain point, we'll be like, okay, this is a game that is ready. But I think that's one of the things, probably, we're having a meeting this afternoon, and one of the goals of that meeting is what is the feature set that we have to launch.
Is this gonna be 99 cents, or what are you thinking?
It's gonna be free, especially with a multiplayer game that you need your friends to play. It's kind of a hard sell to be like, hey, you should download this 99-cent game that I've never played before so that I can try it out with you. It's definitely going to have to be a free game to start with, and then monetized either with the ads or with in-game currency or virtual goods that you upsell.
Did you give me 10 friends free, and then if I want more, I have to pay?
Yeah, that's how Letterpress is monetizing right now, is by number of concurrent games. So you can have 3 currently in progress games, I think, for free, and that's $2 to unlock unlimited.
So the way that we thought about, sorry,
No, go.
the way that we thought about kind of taking on both of those is using the token system as a way of people starting a game. So it would cost 3 tokens for you to actually start a game. So if you only have 10 tokens, you can only start a free game, or something to that effect, which allows people to think in their heads, oh, if I wanted to start another game, I'd have to buy more tokens, or I have to wait 3 hours before my tokens replenish. So it's really kind of a matter of if they want to play more games right now, and it kind of gets that whole mentality of the token system into their head now.
It's how a lot of like city simulation games work. You have so many resources, and those people that really like the game buy more resources.
Right. Yeah, and that's another challenge too, is so with Hatchlings, we have this really dedicated core set of users that pays, but their experience is augmented by the free users, and so that's the real value that the free users provide, is that they provide this community and this atmosphere that makes more value for the paying users. And so I'm not sure how exactly to translate that into this game, but I think we definitely need that balance, and in social games, it's usually only 5% to 10% of the total user base that end up paying, and the other 90 to 95% use the game for free. But their value is in recruiting more people who hopefully will become part of that paying segment, or recruit somebody who ends up paying. So another question for you guys on the PR side, I'm looking kind of at that table, and what would be, so with Hatchlings, one of the compelling stories that we've had is our player-to-player interaction with each other. With this new game, I don't really know what we're trying to craft, what our story is and what our message is, and what our, if we're reaching out to journalists or we're reaching out to, people who are influencers. Was there anything that I've said today or that you've seen that's compelling about this game, or that is, that caught your eye? Sorry to call you out.
No, I think it's interesting that you guys have something even more to your user base and stuff, and I really that's exciting to see in of itself. I think it's definitely cool that it came out of a team building kind of thing. We're actually talking, I think that was the first Starflight or whatever for SBN. That started again. So I think that's kind of a cool aspect of it too. But yeah, I think it sounds really cool. I'm excited.
Cool. Good point. I hadn't even thought about the startup weekend angle.
Yeah, it's an interesting angle, I think.
I think you talked about your childhood. Those memories are always good to people to revisit. So make it a Kodak commercial.
And more than startup happening that was, but with Hatchlings, are you connected to the gaming forums and things? It's not really that type of game, but this would be more more broad.
Right.
Even if you have success in another, you're already a successful game company, you can leverage that and say hey, we've got a new game coming out.
Right.
Get pressing that way.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's one of the things George has really been looking into. And I mentioned the beta codes that we can give out to authorize people on our developer account to try things out, and really reaching out to people who would commit to writing a review of the game before it comes out, which is another challenge in that then you have to get the game done well ahead of time so that you can give it to people who are going to write about it before you can launch it.
And there's the App Store approval process and stuff like that.
Can you send them a dev? A lot of times they'll get, AlphaBrawl, you'll send them punching bags or something in the mail, a dev thing, and tell them to send it back, and the NDA all that.
Yeah, I think we could probably do that too. Does anybody have any experience launching in the App Store Does anybody have like an app that's out there that, I think we've talked a little bit about like the approval process and all of that. How long should we really expect this to be taking?
Probably the first time that we submitted, and it ebbs and flows with the time of year. So we released, I believe it was around like the beginning of May. And at that time, I know that they had some serious issues with pushing apps through. And it was about 2 weeks for us. But that also included a response back. So they had to have a response back. It wasn't rejected, they just needed test credentials. As opposed to signing up organically, they wanted us to provide credentials. So we did, and it took about, I think it was like 2 weeks and 3 days. Since then, we just had another release, and I believe it was 3 to 4 days for that approval. So I would give it probably 1 to 2 weeks on the safe side.
What's been your experience with actually obtaining users from the App Store? Has it been a lot of natural viral growth, or do you have to really push that?
For us, it's been from brands actually putting our stuff inside the packages, so that's primarily where we get this growth. We have had some people find it organically and they go, well, what's this for? And so that really hasn't been our modus operandi. It's been just pushing through the brands, although that's going to change here pretty quickly. One of the things that you can do with the App Store, the iTunes Store, is that now you can put a hold on it, so you can say, approve it, but don't release it until I say push a button. It's nice if you're going to do like scheduled releases, so that you can get it, have it released, and then basically it's a push of a button and then it's up to the store.
Cool. Maybe if I flip that question around more broadly, how did you guys find the last game that you installed on your iPhone or Android device, or even the last app? Are these things that you are hearing about, just from your friends, or are you reading articles, or just browsing?
This is speaking just for me personally, but I think Android, the Play Store is horrible for finding apps. So I Google them, and then there's like deep linking into the Play Store.
You Google just like
Google
Android games in general, or
well, not games usually, but like app to do something. And so I'll Google it, read some reviews on different ones, and then not on the App Store itself, but outside of it, and then there's usually like a deep link to install that works on Android anyway.
Cool.
I don't know if I'm anyone's target demographic, but usually I don't download a game until people start talking about how don't download that game because, you
It's
won't
addicting.
stop playing and it's addicting and all those things. So I don't know if there's a way to really launch with it, don't play this game, but I think there's always sort of a hook there.
That's a good angle, though. I haven't seen anybody do that. That seems like it could be a good hook. Jeff?
Well, the last one I got was from you, the dots. Like, I had seen the TechCrunch coverage, but I kind of ignored it until I started to see people behind you, and they were saying, like, Ivy, that's everyone.
Right,
Like,
at high school.
Point. Like, talking about the mechanics of the game, like, I need to check what this is, and that was the one time thinking.
I use Genius, so your description, your titles will be pretty important. That hopefully Genius will match you with cross-pollination.
How does that work? Is that a description-based thing, or is it games that people who downloaded yours also play?
Point, I don't know. I just know it brings you stuff that kind of gets close to home, or sometimes it's almost exactly the same, or kind of rip on. We have about 5 or 6 apps in the store too, that on Android and iOS. Not to mirror what John said, we've gone from 2 weeks to 4 weeks based on rejection. And if you're trying to sell anything within the game, that's going to hold you up because they're going to look at it. Because they don't like you selling stuff within your app,
Right.
they're making a cut of it, or advertising.
Right.
So if you're promoting Hatchlings and they don't have a part of that, they can hold you up. Google Play Store, I've seen it take 2 hours. So
How have you seen the comparison of like the download numbers between Google Play and the App Store?
I think it was Aaron or somebody over here. Google Play is just a lot of noise. It's pretty hard unless you purposefully. But Android users they understand how they need to find stuff, so they go to Google and then they'll search it, which is kind of native to how you look for things anyway. And I think Google makes sure that those links come up to the top organically as it's close to home. So I think that in itself is okay. But if you're a browsing user, it's just like drinking out of a fire. Unless you can get it promoted something like that.
Right. Have you guys had any of your apps promoted by Apple or Google?
Most of our apps are for our clients. We'll have one come out end of June. That's going to be promoted by Meredith product. So I think that's going to give it a lot of play for the demographic. So that vertical of having latch onto that. We do have connection with somebody who's in charge of the App Store worldwide. Actually met at Big Ones. So that's always a good conversation to have. The guys from Missouri, so it's kind of Midwest guys.
Cool. Is that, I mean, so an App Store promotion or featuring, is that purely an organic thing where they just find it and think it's cool?
His exact words to me were, don't send me crap. If it's cool, we're going to figure out what to do. So,
But give them a heads up, or?
yes, definitely.
Cool.
And I can share that.
So one side of that as well is that if you build an app that uses Apple new features like the passbook and stuff, so obviously we can't really use passbook in AlphaBrawl, but the few apps that integrate the passbook into it straight away got lots of coverage because they had that, what apps have passbook, and they got all this free coverage. People started downloading that way. So integrating and building in the things that Apple provides actually gives you more chance of being covered by Apple on their App Store because they want to promote their own features as well. Another question that we have is whether or not we should launch AlphaBrawl to iOS and Android at the same time or space them out so we get more hype going on, later on in the product. First launch to iOS, then Android user, I want to play this, when's it coming out? It builds up that tension and release Android. What do you guys have any experience in doing two separate launches or doing them at the same time, get everyone on and ride the wave together? Or
I might worry a little bit about not having your friends play with you so that you drop engagement. And it's just like, well, when it comes out, do I remember to actually take that game back up and play with my friends?
Well, what it is that, so if iOS users have been playing it and then they slowly fall off, they lose interest in the game, then their Android friends start playing it, then you might re-engage them to play it. So that's that's one way you can approach it as well. But I was trying to see if people had any experience out there and how that.
There's nothing holding back from a technical perspective. This would all just be.
Yeah.
I think it gives you another round of hype, versus all the hype at once. Maybe that trails off. Now you can have another round of hype for
Because the game's good enough, it's going to sustain. So, worry about that. Well, all right. Let's